Hey, I'm Hammeh. Today we're going to be taking a look at Overwatch's fourth comic, A Better World. In this comic we see Symmetra's trip to Brazil to support a Vishkar Corporation construction bid turn into corporate espionage and then a fight for lives, making her question ultimately both her employers and her own moral purpose. We'll be taking a quick look through talking points and fun bits of the comic, along with a little light speculation on what new Overwatch story and lore we may have learned too. Suffice to say this contains spoilers, link for the comics in the description below if you haven't read it already. As a quick summary, Symmetra has been sent to Rio in Brazil to help a bid for a new development in the city on behalf of her employer Vishkar. When they lose to a local bid, Symmetra is deployed on a corporate mission to find info to discredit the bid winner. Whilst getting lost in the favelas before the mission, she's shown the way by a little girl, and that reminds Symmetra of her childhood. When the mission starts, she runs into some difficulties and then turns out to have unexpected consequences as Vishkar take an action above her head. Although Vishkar eventually wins the bid, Symmetra ends up questioning whether they are really making a better world after all. Here's some of the interesting bits I enjoyed from the comic. Firstly, it was interesting to have a look at what Symmetra actually does for Vishkar. It's interesting that she doesn't blanch at the order to break in at all. She's clearly done this before and she's used to her role. From her lore and backstory, we know a little bit about Symmetra. She's a special employee, she was one of Utopia's top architects, but Vishkar actually saw greater potential in her abilities. She was sent on clandestine missions around the world to uphold Vishkar corporate interests and to expand its influence into other countries. Clearly this is what she's doing in Brazil. In the comic we see Symmetra teleporting in, setting up her turret defences, immobilising security and shielding a young girl, all of her in-game abilities, but she interestingly also creates light bridges and slides, all very useful for a little bit of espionage, escape and infiltration. This comic also serves to shed a bit more light on what Vishkar actually do. We know already that following the first Omnic crisis, Vishkar set themselves up in southern India and began the laborious process of creating new self-sustaining cities to house the nation's displaced population. One such city, Utopia, was created using hard-light technology. This enabled its architects to shape city streets, utilities and living spaces in the blink of an eye, and this is what Symmetra is very proficient with. In the comic we see Vishkar bidding for a new contract in Brazil, so Vishkar are clearly doing well at this point in Overwatch's timeline out of this tech. If we have a look at Numbani, we can see their price is currently up on the stock market, and if they're bidding for international contracts, they must be doing pretty well. Once we see Vishkar's operating methods, it's clear to see why they're doing pretty well. We see the lengths that they'll go to when Sanjay, Symmetra's handler, somehow remotely explodes Kaleido's office building, and that starts a catastrophic fire in the surrounding favelas. In this comic, to summarise, we see Vishkar break and enter into an opposing bidder's office, murder security guards, destroy a building and set a whole neighbourhood on fire regardless of the collateral damage and consequences. Vishkar will kill to secure contracts. This puts them, even though they're a corporation, into being nigh on terrorists in their activities, and they are definitely another big threat to the, presumably at this moment in the timeline, Overwatchless world. When Symmetra asks her colleague about the fate of the burned favela, the answer is simple. They'll get replacement housing that fits their station and serves the greater order. Vishkar's order, of course, that is. Another interesting thing that this comic throws up is Symmetra's personality and morality. It's interesting to see that Symmetra is moved by the young girl who guides her to the favelas, being a memory of her childhood, and vows to make their lives better, no matter what it takes. However, she also says that she doesn't kill if she doesn't have to. A, that means that she may well have killed before, protecting her own life or similar while on operations for Vishkar, and B, that she still wants to try and be non-violent, which is a bit of an interesting contradiction. Corporate espionage is obviously fine, or something Symmetra is used to. We have to remember, of course, that she's been brought up within this corporation since she was very, very young, taken away from her family, so they very much have their part to play in shaping her moral system. After she was identified as being one of the few capable of becoming a light-bending architect, Satya Vaswani, as she was at the time, was plucked from very extreme poverty and placed into Vishkar's Architect Academy. She's never returned home, and she's been isolated and lonely since a very young age. We see her find some kind of link with her lost home in Rio's favelas still. Symmetra's reaction to the building being destroyed is interesting. She's not actually fussed about Kaleido, more the incapacitated men in the building that was destroyed who have been killed probably, and the favela being set ablaze. Even though Symmetra saves the girl who guided her from death, her burned face in the end panels serves as a reminder of what's happened, leading Symmetra to repeat to herself unsurely, we're making this world a better place. We're making the world a better place. Here we perhaps see the doubt creeping in that's described in her bio. Sometimes apparently Symmetra wonders whether the control and order that she desires are truly best for humanity. Another thing that's quite interesting are a few panels where Symmetra actually says, Sanjay has always said I was different, everyone has, asking where I fit on the spectrum. It used to bother me because I knew it was true. It doesn't bother me anymore because I can do things nobody else can do. Some people have taken that to mean that Symmetra is on the autistic spectrum in some way. I'm really not qualified to comment on that, but it'll be interesting to see in the future if Blizzard shed any more light on that or not. seems to be very interesting insight into her character either way. The final thing that we found interesting, or that should probably flag to you guys, is that this is actually really the first part of a larger story. From Lucio's bio, we know that his community in Rio was thrown into chaos when Vishkar secured a contract to redevelop large tracts of the city, and we should probably guess that this is the contract Symmetra is working on now. Vishkar apparently then imposed controls on the residents, enforced curfews, cracked down on what the company perceived as lawless behaviour, and exploited the populace as a cheap labour force. So we already have a bit of a spoiler that if this is the same contract and timeline, that Symmetra's contract is not going to work out very well. Lucio ends up leading a rebellion against Vishkar and stealing their sonic technology, which is what his signature weapons run off, but we'll save all of that for another video, or perhaps a Lucio comic should it be released in future. Thanks very much for tuning in to this quick analysis of Overwatch's latest digital comic. If you like this video, please hit that like button below, subscribe, and do comment with what Overwatch map, world, or character story you'd like to see covered next. Until next time, I've been Hammeh, take it easy.